Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're all about the positivity here on the show, and with me right now, I've got a very special guest. He is the owner and operator of New England Championship Wrestling and has worked for numerous wrestling mediums and outlets over the course of his career. A wealth of knowledge and experience. He's got a story he's going to share with us today. I'm pleased to welcome the one, the only, Sheldon Goldberg. Sheldon, welcome to Wrestling with Heart.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yes. So are you from Boston originally?
Yes, I am. Born and raised.
All right. Tell me about your childhood and upbringing in the New England area.
Well, I grew up in a part of Boston called Mattapan, and we didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up. In the late '60s, the mostly Jewish part of Boston called Mattapan started to change very, very rapidly, and we were one of the last families to move out of Mattapan to another part of Boston called Roslindale, which is right next door to it, actually. So money was tight. It was a very difficult upbringing, but I had a very loving family and made the best of it. And when I was in high school, skipping ahead, when I was in high school, I started to get interested and involved in local media, and that opened up a lot of doors for me. And I actually had a whole different career before I started getting involved in professional wrestling. I was kind of a media person. I wanted to be a DJ at one point in my life. That really didn't work out for me. But I started to get involved in TV production and all that, and I was having a very difficult time trying to break in and find a job in one of the local TV or radio stations in the area. And what I ended up doing is I ended up getting a job working for a local theater company doing publicity. And the reason that that worked out for me was because I knew all these people in the media from trying to get jobs from them and having some exposure to some of those outlets over the years. I was in an Explorer program in high school that met at one of the local TV and radio stations, and I had a lot of media contacts from that. So publicity was something that I had a knack for. I knew the people. I learned how to write press releases and so forth, and I uh, I actually connected pretty well in that profession, doing publicity for theater companies. And before I knew it, I was doing PR for Broadway shows on tour, and later became a producer. Uh, Created and produced some of my own work, and that worked out pretty well. And then that business started to fail because the money was getting difficult to raise. I spent more time raising money for projects than actually producing the projects themselves. So that became very, very difficult. I started getting involved in other stuff. I produced a newsletter for collectors of wrestling memorabilia, which is actually pretty successful. And through that, I rekindled my contacts in professional wrestling. Met a guy in 1990 by the name of the Boston Bad Boy Tony Rumble. I don't know if that name rings a bell with you. He worked with ICW, was syndicated all over the country. Tony had a company called the Century Wrestling Alliance, and I got involved with that. Started doing their website and various and sundry other things, and we became very, very close, Tony and I. He passed away in November of 1999, and then I started my own promotion called New England Championship Wrestling, and that's still going after 20 plus years. I'm happy to say, and here we are.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's interesting how that has all worked out because as somebody that's also in the broadcasting business himself, I can understand the struggles of finding jobs and breaking in, especially because it's very competitive and tough. But the fact
Well,
that you were able to find something that you love and were able to, make those contacts and connections, that's very important because you never know where you can end up.
right. That's true. The other thing is, I grew up in Boston. Boston is one of the biggest media markets in America.
Hmm.
The guys that I ran into who were DJs and TV reporters and announcers, you know, I knew as soon as I walked in the door that these were some of the top people in the industry. And me thinking that I could come in as a kid without any knowledge or experience other than whatever I could glean from whatever was happening around me. I wasn't naive enough to think that I was going to get, you know, a big job. I knew I was going to have to work my way up. And just getting that entry level position was a difficult thing to do. But, I learned and kept close to me all those lessons that I learned from different people over the years. And eventually I got to use them when I got to pro wrestling because working in pro wrestling as a promoter, I had broadcasting. I ended up doing a radio show for 3 years that was nationally syndicated. I ended up doing local television. So all those things that I had had exposure to when I was young, I ended up using those things later on. I just didn't realize what I was going to use them for and how I was going to use them, but eventually it all came to pass. So very, very grateful for all of that.
What can you tell me about like any pieces of advice that you got from your mentors or teachers in the industry that you applied and still apply to this day?
Eyes open, ears open, mouth shut. Learn as much as you can. Do whatever it takes to ingratiate yourself to, whatever the situation is you're trying to get into. If it's pro wrestling, you don't you're not going to walk in the door and be the champion right away. I mean, there's nothing wrong with setting up the ring. There's nothing wrong with putting up posters. There's nothing wrong with helping out with a website or with graphic design or with social media. I mean, wrestling companies aren't just about wrestling. They're about a lot of other things too. So if you can figure out how to create a niche for yourself, how to make yourself valuable, and more importantly, if you're a wrestler, how to make yourself versatile. Versatility is very important. If you want to have a long lasting career in pro wrestling, people can't wrestle forever. You're eventually going to have to move on to something else. And so, the ability to contribute to a wrestling promotion in any number of ways is a very valuable thing.
Yeah, and like you said, it extends to all different avenues with the entertainment business, the whole industry in itself. You see guys like John Cena and The Rock, they're now multi, $1 million movie stars now and television stars. And so
Right.
if you want to exceed to that level, you have to really apply yourself to really get to that level. But going back a little bit with you and your love of professional wrestling, was wrestling
Mm.
something you grew up loving as a kid?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As soon as I saw it, I was really into comic books, and then I saw pro wrestling on TV, and this was the 1960s. So that one light over the ring, and guys who were larger than life. Of course, well, when I started watching wrestling, the champion was Bruno Sammartino, and if you grew up in this part of the country, Bruno Sammartino was like God. He was the man, and was the man for a very long period of time because people believed in him. Back in that era, wrestling had a very different aura than it has now. Um, people weren't sure what they were seeing was, predetermined or not. There was a lot of people that thought what they were seeing in that ring was 100% real.
That suspense of disbelief. You always want to make sure that the audience is knowing what's going on, and you want to think that this guy is about to tear into this other guy, and they got to make it look realistic. So that this person's actually hurt.
That's right.
That's important. That's part of the whole. That's part of the deal. So
Hmm.
you're intrigued when you watch it. It's like,
Right.
wow, oh my gosh, this person's suffering. He might have hurt his leg when he was performing a moonsault off the top rope. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you want to do is make people feel something, tap into people's emotions. Doesn't matter whether it's a play or whether it's pro wrestling or a movie. Tapping into people's emotions is how you succeed.
Hmm. Now, you had mentioned a bit ago that you got your first job in professional wrestling working for a collector's magazine outlet. It was,
Well, it wasn't a job. I actually started that newsletter.
oh, you started it. Okay.
Yeah, I started it and I published it and I wrote all the articles and so forth. I knew I could write, and I just thought it would be a cool little exercise. It was a niche that no one had touched. And at that point in time, after the '80s, wrestling memorabilia started to be a big thing. And I just did it more or less as a hobby. I didn't expect it, to, it was successful while it was running. I did make some money on it. But more importantly, I made a lot of contacts. And before I know it, I was getting involved with a local promotion, and off I went from there.
Do you remember the first call that you got asking if you were interested in doing something related in the business outside of your venture?
Well, here's the deal. I mean, when I was doing Matt Marketplace, one of the things I was doing is selling memorabilia through the newsletter. And I had thought about selling stuff at shows. I didn't really have any contacts. And then I met the late great Walter Killer Kowalski, and I started selling stuff at his shows, and that was pretty successful for me. Then in 1990, I went to a wrestling convention in New York. I bought a table and sold stuff at one of John Aresley's Weekend of Champions conventions in New York. The first one, which was really the big one that had Flair and Jushin Liger and Buddy Rogers and Bruno Sammartino and a whole bunch of people. I had a table, and this guy walks up to me, and it was Tony Rumble. And it turned out that we grew up less than a mile away from each other, but had never met each other until that moment in New York. And we became fast friends. And then I started to get involved with him and wanted to help him out in some way. He just wanted to have me around. He just wanted to have me around and how to sell stuff, and he thought it made the show look better, and gave people something to do, during the intermission. But I wanted to help out in some way. I offered to help out. And so I ended up doing the website, and I ended up doing tickets and doing all kinds of stuff, and learned a lot of things from Tony. And sadly, he passed away in November of 1999. And shortly after that, I started NECW.
It takes a lot of work to really get a promotion off the ground, a lot of hard work. What can you tell me about your decision to start up New England Championship Wrestling?
I was nervous because I had not worked in a wrestling office per se. I worked with Tony, and I got exposure to what he did and how he did things and so forth. And I had some exposure to how Kowalski had done things and so forth. But starting up on my own was kind of a scary proposition. I had some good support from people around me, and was able to get going. But it took a good 5 years before I really had gotten my feet under me, and really started to get it, so to speak. And that education continued for another 5 years. And by the time I was 10 years into it, I pretty much knew what I was doing, and had already had a year of some television underneath. We started actually in 2004, before there was YouTube or anything like that. We started producing a little online TV show that we distributed on our website, and we did that for about almost 200 episodes.
Mm.
And yeah, so that was the beginning of our me training myself and training the people around me and so forth to produce something that resembled television. And eventually we did get on TV here in the Boston area. And we had a couple of different runs on television, but it took a long time to develop the feel for it and to learn things along the way, and what worked and what didn't work and so forth. So it was a lot of trial and error, but we did it. We poured our hearts and souls into it. At least I did. And we we have a pretty remarkable track record of great matches and people that worked for us before they became famous. and so forth. So,
Yeah, notable
um,
alumni that came through there.
mm,
Kofi Kingston, Mercedes Monet / Sasha Banks. Uh,
right. We gave her a first professional match.
wow. What was she like to work with?
Very easy. She was great. I wish we had worked with her more. She was a sweet girl. I remember the first show that she was on for us, which was her first professional match. She had her mom and her brother, and she was all excited. And that match is on YouTube. You can find it. It's in our something called our 20th anniversary collection, and it's a tag match. And she was great. I knew from looking at her the first time. I said, "This girl's got something."
Yeah. And she's now in AEW as of this recording, as of this podcast, and former multiple time WWE Women's Champion as Sasha Banks. And yeah, she's doing incredible right now in AEW. So Kofi Kingston's another one. Do you remember working with him?
Yep, yep. Kofi was always kind of looking to learn something, and uh, I remember having some conversations with him. How was my match? How was my match? And I'm like, kid, you're athletically, you're great. Personality wise, you've got something that very few guys in the area have, which is an actual personality. You could cut a promo. He could be a personality. He just had that kind of charismatic. He was doing the Jamaican gimmick at the time, and I told him, I says, just don't fall into any bad habits. Pursue the best training you can get, and you're going to go far. Sure enough.
Who's
I'll
some?
tell you who else worked for me before he became famous was John Cena. And he worked for us one time, and it was the first time that his family had seen him wrestle. He was getting ready to go from living in California and working for the UPW promotion out there to going to OVW, and he was coming home to get stuff, and a mutual friend of ours had put us together, and he wanted to have his family see him wrestle, and we just happened to have a card going on the weekend that he was going to be here. And so he wrestled Frankie Kazarian, of all people, on that card. And they had a terrific. His family bought like 80 tickets. I mean, most of the house was the scene of family. So it was pretty cool. But he was through. I told him, I said, you're going to be world champion one of these days.
and to
So
see, and to see the career that he's had, over 20 years is just remarkable. And
interesting thing about John, when I told him that he was booked, he sent me an email thanking me for booking him, promising that his match against Frankie Kazarian was never going to stink out the joint, that he was going to be great, and he was very grateful and so forth. So I always had a very high opinion of him because of that. Very conscientious kid.
mhm. He's definitely earned the moniker the greatest of all time because he just can do it all. Comedy, wrestling, showmanship.
Right, right, right. I don't know if I'd go as far as say greatest of all time, but he's up there, that's for sure.
Yeah.
In his era, he's probably up there.
Mhm. Well, let's talk about some of the other stuff that you've done. You've also written a book,
Yeah.
which I think is really cool. It's very inspiring in its own right. Tell me about what made you decide to pursue that.
Well, here's the deal. 2 years ago, I was on a plane home from Las Vegas. I went to the Cauliflower Alley Club reunion, and I had not been feeling well prior to getting on the airplane. In fact, I got to the airport, and I was not feeling well at all. I could barely move. I got a wheelchair to get me to ticketing and to get me to the gate. And I figured, well, as soon as I get off this plane, I'm gonna go to the hospital. I'm gonna get checked out. Well, about two-thirds of the way through the flight, I get up to go to the bathroom, and I could barely get back to my seat. And the flight crew immediately knew that something was wrong. So they sat me down. They gave me a nitroglycerin pill, thinking I was having a heart attack. And then they gave me a couple of aspirin. They had a nurse that was on the flight, and she sat with me for for the remainder of the flight. They had an ambulance waiting for me when we landed, and I got to the hospital. What happened was my kidneys had failed. Now I'd known that I had kidney disease for years, and I knew that there was the specter of kidney failure at some point in my life. I just didn't think it was going to happen at that particular time. So I spent a month in the hospital. And while I'm laying in the hospital bed, I said to myself, well, I know I'm not going to be able to do all the things that I was able to do before, but I'm going to figure out what I can do, and I'm going to do that. So it took a while. After I got out of the hospital, I had been working full time, and I went back to work for 6 months, and just realized that between 40 hours a week of work and 12 hours a week of dialysis, it was just too much. That's all I had. It's all I could do was just work and dialysis, and that was it. And I didn't want that to be my life. I wanted there to be other things too. And so I made the decision to retire because I was of retirement age. And I figured, okay, what projects can I do? I actually tried to get NECW live events back up off the ground, and that wasn't working out. I wanted to do it in a particular way. For 20 years, I had really produced wrestling more or less on a shoestring, and I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to raise the capital to be able to do it the right way. I actually wanted to get my own building, and came close, but that didn't work out. So I figured I'm going to come up with other kinds of creative projects. I had always wanted to write a book. And now, without 40 hours a week of a regular job, I had the time to do it. So I originally started writing a totally different story. And then I had this idea for the book that is called The Last Fall, which I released last October, and wrote the book in about 3 weeks, believe it or not, and put it out last October, self-published on Amazon, instant hit, rave reviews up and down, and I was just so gratified. I can't even describe to you the feeling of because I figured I'm going to write a book. The accomplishment would be just writing the book. Whatever happened to it, if I sold 10 copies, okay, I sold 10 copies, but at least I published a book. Well, I've sold hundreds of copies, and just have been so grateful for the positive response that the book has received. I am currently finishing up the sequel to that book, which hopefully will be out in the next couple of months. So very anxious for that.
Yeah, for those that haven't read The Last Fall yet, tell me about what the book is about, if you can.
Well, the book follows the life and times of a fictional wrestler by the name of Rick Pacheco. It follows him from the point that he literally stumbles into the wrestling business at the age of 11 in 1971 to the end of his in-ring career in 1999. And all the ups and downs that happened to him along the way, how he breaks into the business, what the business was like in the late 70s, how the business changed in the 80s, and what happens to him along the way. He has a lot of ups and downs. A major tragedy takes place along the way, and eventually he has to restart his career in the most unlikely place and make a go of it. So that's basically the synopsis of The Last Fall. As I say, it's gotten rave reviews, um, and I think if you read it, I think you'll enjoy it, especially if you're a wrestling fan.
Oh, no
But a lot
doubt.
of non-fans have liked it too. I'm really surprised by the especially female fans. They like the characters,
Hmm.
so
Yeah, I
very
mean,
gratified by that.
I think pro wrestling is definitely starting to get hot again and popular again, and to see that so many people are really into it now, it's amazing. It's really good
Yeah.
to have, more fans, actually, proud to say that they're wrestling fans, because
Mhm.
it's not every day that you can find people that are really into it. And
Yep.
so it's a testament to what you're able to do, and other
Mm.
people that are able to say put stuff out that can try to get people interested in it.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And when I started promoting in 2000, independent wrestling was a relatively new thing. There weren't a lot of independent promoters in the country. It was a handful. And one of the biggest challenges that I had as a promoter back then was just trying to get people to realize that, hey, it's okay to go to this. It's a thing. It's its own thing. It's your friendly neighborhood wrestling promotion. No, it's not in a big arena. You're up close and personal with it, and you never know who you're going to see. In the early days of NECW, you never knew who was going to show up on those cards, and some of them, quite a few of them, became big names much later.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it wasn't a John Cena or a Kofi Kingston, it was a Beth Phoenix or a Mercedes Martinez, a Doug Williams. He had his first match in America in NECW. Sumi Sakai, first match in America, NECW. So yeah, I mean, there's a long list of big names that came through New England Championship Wrestling before they became big names. And if you were an NECW fan back in those days, like I said, you never know who's going to show up on those cards.
Always unpredictable. That's the one thing I love about professional wrestling is the
Yep,
unpredictability of anything can happen. Now I'm sure
very true.
yes. Now I'm sure running NECW, you guys ran a lot of benefit shows too.
We did, yes. We did. Yeah, one of the things that I wanted to get involved in was benefit shows. We did quite a few over the years. We did a big event a couple of years in a row. It was a benefit to raise money for cystic fibrosis research. It was an event called the Hot Dog Safari.
Hmm.
Now, we didn't organize the whole thing. It was organized actually by somebody else. We were simply the entertainment portion of it. But what it was is this local radio talk show host named Eddie Andelman uh, had become very involved in raising money for cystic fibrosis, and he put together this event called the Hot Dog Safari, which he got different vendors to give away hot dogs. There are different hot dog manufacturers and different, you get soft drinks and whatever. And for one price, all the food was free. You just go from vendor to vendor and get whatever you wanted to eat. And then the entertainment was New England Championship Wrestling. We did that for a couple of years. And that was a pretty cool thing to be involved in. We had done a number of events for different local causes. We did for the town of Milton, Massachusetts. We raised money to fund their special needs program for the town of Milton. We did a couple of years of benefit shows for the South Middle School in Brockton, Massachusetts, which funded their school lunch program and field trips and various and sundry other things. So we've done our share of benefit shows over the years, and very proud of those.
What is it about giving back to the community that gives you the most joy?
Well, it's being part of the fabric of the community that's so important. If you're a local company, it's like being a local sports team. Those teams become very ingratiated in the communities that they're located in, and that shouldn't be any different for pro wrestling. So we try to act in that regard.
Yeah, because what you're doing is you're putting on a show and trying to promote entertainment that appeals to so many people and to get them, brighten their day, brighten their night when they're going through a rough time in their life. You want to be there for that person or that, that family. So it's very important to do that.
I always believed in having a good relationship and a good bond with our fan base. Whenever we had a show, if I wasn't tied up with something else, I'd be at the door as people came in tearing tickets and thanking people for showing up and, shaking hands and patting kids on the head. And all of that was very sincere. I wanted people to know that I appreciated them showing up and being there. And I think people respond when they know that their presence is appreciated.
Hmm. Well, what is NECW doing now? Are you still running shows?
Not exactly. We have a project coming out uh, November 7th at a place called the Peabody Black Box Theater in Peabody, Massachusetts. It's called New England Championship Wrestling Presents the Lost Matches Live. Now, if you go to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/NECW Wrestling, two W's, you'll find literally hundreds of videos of matches and things from the 20 plus years that we've been in operation.
Mm.
What I decided to do was I wanted to give people an event, and I didn't want to do a traditional live event like a regular NECW event because we've been out of the live event business for a long period of time now, and I wanted to give people something different. So what I did was I put together 8 matches from our archives that were either never released on video or they're not available on YouTube. And we're going to present this collection of matches in a theater on a big screen with a live Q&A afterwards. So that's what the Lost Matches Live is, and that's why it's live, because we're going to have a live Q&A afterwards with myself and several other people involved. So I thought that was kind of a unique and cool idea. I've only heard of it done one other time,
Mm.
and not around here, out in the Midwest. So I thought it would be a cool way to give our fans an event, um, and something unique.
Yes.
And we've maintained a rapport with our fans over the years by posting old videos and pictures and things of that nature. But now we're giving them something new, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing all of our NECW fans and mingling with them and so forth. So very excited about that coming up.
Definitely seems pretty cool. It's really interesting that you're able to do all that. Uh, do you foresee going back and resuming the live events in the future?
I don't know. My health is an issue. I just don't have the stamina that I had before. And if I hit the lottery big and could hire a bunch of people and more or less just oversee, that might be another issue. But I don't know. I'm at this point in my life. I'm happy doing the stuff that I'm doing. I've got to whatever I do, I have to do it at the pace that I can do it at. So I'm going to keep doing stuff. I've still got tricks up my sleeves, as you've heard,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm going to give people whatever I can give them, and uh, you know, so I'm not out of the water yet. So
No, still got some fight left.
it's like I say, I couldn't exactly do what I was doing before, but I knew I was going to do something, and it would be something creative and something unique. And with the last fall and with the Lost Matches Live, I think we're accomplishing that.
Yeah, you definitely are. Well, Sheldon, this has been great getting a chance to speak with you. I just want to say thank you for coming on to the show. It means a lot to me and to my listeners and viewers that are watching this on YouTube. Where can people find more about you on social media if you want to plug the event and everything? Go for
Sure.
it.
Well, you can find me personally, Sheldon Goldberg, on Facebook. You can find me on X at NECW. You can find the NECW Facebook page at NECW Wrestling. YouTube is youtube.com/NECW Wrestling, two W's there. And I'm on Instagram, Sheldon Goldberg 311. I'm on whatever. I'm on Instagram. I'm everywhere. So
Yeah.
everywhere but TikTok. No TikTok, but
And you've
I'm
got your
easily
books.
found.
Hmm.
Yeah, you can get that book on Amazon. It's available in paperback or Kindle. And The Last Fall is again the title. And I should have grabbed one to hold it up. I'm asleep at the switch today, but you can easily find it, and it's a great book, and I hope you'll give it a try.
Yeah, definitely. We'll check it out. Thank you again, and you're more than welcome to come back, Sheldon.
It would be my pleasure.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.